Hey folks, this is Judd, and I am daydreaming about dragons again. And I'm looking at a blog post by Necropraxis, and I'll put a link. It'll be the first link in the links for the show links. How many times can I say links? Many times. And it is 20 questions. Here are 20 rules clarifications that are likely to be needed anyways at some point. And I think it's mostly about like if you're doing a like D&D as a toolbox, right? So I liked it. It made me think about my own D&D hack that is a-coming. So I thought I'd answer those questions. So here we go. Question 1. Ability score generation method? Question mark. 3d6 in order is how I'm thinking. But the cool thing, here's a little cool thing, is that your equipment will be generated by the numbers that you use for the 3d6. So you want to like roll a 3d6, then set your 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s aside in different areas, and they'll allow you to either generate, to buy things or attempt to buy things or roll on cool charts. So if you get lower stats, it'll give you chances at cooler stuff. Does that make sense? All right. It's a work in progress. I'm working on it, but it's going to be kind of cool. So 3d6 in order, but with an asterisk. How are death and dying handled? I mean, I want you to, probably dying at 0, with a little bit of time to save them. And we've already talked about how death is going to be physically manifested. And yeah, I mean, death comes for you. And then if you can fight it off and you can stay, then you probably become something undead. I mean, you don't just like get to hang out. Your body's dead. Interesting. What kind of undead do you become? That depends. We'll have to figure that out. What about raising the dead? I think raising the dead is probably very difficult, but I think going beyond the Black Gate to use some Dungeon World mythology is possible. It's always a thing you can do. And there's a thing that Dungeon Crawl Classics does, where if you want to break the rules, you can just ask the GM, like, hey, I want to do a quest to, go get my friend's soul from beyond the Black Gate. The GM will make an adventure for you. It won't be easy. Maybe it's something you shouldn't do, but it's possible. How are replacement PCs handled? That's another good question. So I want to, Ron Edwards' Circle of Hands, I want to vibe off that a little bit. So if you die in the early part of the adventure, you can play your ghost. So you can hang out and help the players, offer helping dice here and there as the ghost. Or you can play a henchman. And I think when you die, you start off... I think there might be different signposts. So if you die at a certain level, you can come back at that level, but it'll... Not always, right? I think it's complicated. Not too complicated, but yeah. And I also am thinking about old character trees from back in the Dark Sun days. And I'd like to do something like that, where you have a bunch of character trees, and so you possibly can be, brewing more than one character at a time. Decide who to play for a specific adventure. Good stuff. Initiative, individual, group, or something else. Something else. I want conflict to be a big, gruesome, all at one time mess. I want you absolutely to be able to, stab each other and just about die. So I want everything to happen all at once. And I've got a system for doing that. I think I've got a system for trying to get ahead and get that thing in first, get that stab in first, or whatever it is. It's working. I like it. It has to do with throwing D6s on top of your D20 and all kinds of stuff. But it's fun. Are there critical hits and fumbles? How do they work? That's a good question. I'm prone to allow for stunting, so you can try different crazy things and fun things based, work using the environment. I'm not crazy about critical hits and fumbles. Not nuts about them. Do I get benefits from wearing a helmet? Yes. Protect your grape. Can I hurt my friends if I fire into melee or do something similarly silly? Yes, you absolutely can. Will we need to run from some encounters? Will we be able to kill everything? You absolutely should run sometimes. Level draining monsters, yes or no? Yes, but when they drain your levels, it becomes a physically manifested thing. It becomes like a little black diamond that the monster carries around with them until they can spend it elsewhere. So, absolutely, but you can get it back. If you get that black diamond back, you can get the level put back in you. That's pretty cool. Are there going to be cases where a failed save results in PC death? I don't think there's going to be one save and die, but I think there could be a situation where if you don't make this save, you know, and then in another round of combat, you will die. But I don't think it's one save death. I'm not a big fan of that. How strictly are encumbrance and resources tracked? I think I'm going to be using usage dies. I like usage dies. What's required when my PC gains a level? Training? Do I get new spells automatically? Can I happen in the middle of an adventure? Do I have to wait for downtime? I think you level up immediately. And you don't get new spells immediately. You have to find them. You have to go out there and find shreds of old spell books. They're around. What do I get experience for? Great question. So I'm working on a bingo sheet that the group will use. And when they get bingo, the group gets a level. Not everyone gets the level. The group gets to figure out where they put that level. So, and what you get experience for, there are some things that are set, but the group can also write things into the bingo sheet. Good stuff. How are traps located? Description, die rolling, some combination. I like descriptive traps. I like really obvious descriptive traps where it's like a puzzle. What are you going to do to you know, if you step on the wrong thing, there's a blow dart. How are you going to deal with that? I like it being problem solving rather than die rolling. Are retainers encouraged and has morale work? Morale is a stat, and the morale of your retainers will be based on a charisma roll, and they will run on you. Absolutely. How do I identify magic items? I haven't thought about that. I'm gonna have to think about it. I'm gonna have to think about it. I don't think there's an identify spell. It doesn't interest me. Maybe librarians. I do love me some librarians. Can I buy magic items? Oh, come on. How about just potions? I don't think you can. I mean, maybe, but I think they're really pretty rare. I've got to think about my potion mechanics. 'Cause I've got the magic stuff set pretty well, but I've got to think about potions. It's a good idea. Can I create magic items? Yes, you can. It's difficult. It's dangerous, but you can do it. When and how? Yeah, you'll probably want to wait till you're up an upper level before you can do that. Just because I think it takes damage to do it. And if you die casting a spell, that's how liches are made, baby. What about splitting the party? Yeah, you know, it happens. It happens. But sometimes it's the thing you have to do. Cool. That was fun. It's fun to think about things. Fun to get the hack in order and start to think about how I want to do it. Nice. Thank you, Necropraxis. It was nice to have a way to think about my upcoming game as it becomes a more beefed out Google Doc. You are in the inspiration section. This link. All right. Let's see what the inspiration goat has for us today, shall we? That's a good one, Inspiration Goat. That's an interesting one. Inspiration Goat has brought me A Song of Ice and Fire, better known as Game of Thrones, if you're watching it on HBO. And I want to talk about this, not because I have such complex feelings about it, which I think will make for a good thing to talk about. And it has definitely... Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire had a profound effect on my gaming. And I want to talk about that too, because that's what this is all about, really. For those of you who don't know, Game of Thrones is a television show on HBO. It was originally a series of books by George R.R. Martin. I'm sure you all know this. When I first read these books in 2001, I had no idea that I was going to fast forward to a time when ads for this were going to be on buses that went by. When my coworkers will be talking about, oh my God, there's going to be an official Game of Thrones Oreo packaging. It's just nutty to me how mainstream it is. You know? I just can't even begin. So let's begin at the beginning. I just want to talk about how it played into my life. I went and visited an old gaming buddy, my friend Doug, and I was on my way out of Florida in kind of a definitive move for my adult life. I was moving from Florida after being abroad in Japan for a year, and I was moving back from Florida after 3 months to move back to Ithaca, to move in with a woman who was my friend, who would then become my girlfriend and eventually become my wife. And Doug had a copy of Game of Thrones on his shelf, and he was like, I would give it to you, but I want to have a copy of this book. You have to go buy it. And I was like, I've been hearing good things about it. And he's like, just go buy it. And I did. On that trip, I believe I stopped in a bookstore on the way north, and I picked it up, and it definitely grabbed me. And when I got to Ithaca and I moved in with the lovely Janaki, I said, hey, I just read this, and you and I were talking about stuff that plays into this, and you've got to read it. And she went upstairs to bed, and I met her in the kitchen the next morning, and she was like, I have to go to work, you jerk. And I was like, yeah, okay, good morning. And she's not like that. So it was really stunning. It was like, what's happening? She's like, I stayed up all night reading this damn book. Where's the second one? And I was like, whoa, I'm still reading the second one. Stop, tap the brakes. So that's one aspect it had in my life. It definitely played a role in my gaming life. It definitely got me thinking about shades of gray and things not being quite so black and white. I know morally the things are a little shaky with that book. I'm not crazy about all the decisions George R. R. Martin has made. So I'm not even really going to talk about the book so much as much or the series or any of it. What I'm interested more in is how it affected my gaming. It changed the way I thought about some things. And it caused a problem. It caused a real problem in my D&D game, right? It caused me to start thinking in real moral grays. And that's cool as long as everybody else is thinking in that way too. And no one else was thinking about that. No one else. And I remember there was a game, I was playing a game of D&D. I had done away with alignment because I had decided that alignment was beneath me or whatever, like whatever. I was one of those guys at that point. And I was just like, no, there's no alignment, good, evil, blah, 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 blah. Let's just, people are people. And the players were escorting a drow assassin back to a portal to the Underdark. And they ran across a paladin. The paladin was like, what is going on? Why are you escorting this drow? And they're like, oh, he's, we are, ambassadors for the Green Lady, who was the green dragon they served. Because, if dragons aren't, if there's no alignment, then dragons don't have alignment, right? Then green dragons aren't evil. Okay, you're with me. Good. Come along for the ride. And the paladin went away, but he was an NPC. And he assumed that there was some kind of mind control at bay, and he snuck into their camp and he murdered the drow in his sleep because he thought the drow was evil, and they got into a huge fight with him, and I think they killed him, and it caused a huge problem with that order of paladins, and it also caused a problem with the players. If I'm being honest with myself, the players were not pleased. They were like, a knight would not act that way, and I was like, no, bro, that's not. You need to think about what knights are, because in my mind, knights are thugs at that point. I'm all Game of Throned up. Chivalry? Give me a break. You think that really matters in the battlefield? You really think that really? So that caused a problem. All right, so let's talk about a good effect Game of Thrones had. Because what Game of Thrones did is it made a whole fantasy world part of people's vocabulary. And I've been wanting to game with my dad for my whole life. He's the person who got me into science fiction, got me into fantasy, got me into comic books. So I've been wanting to game with him forever. And he was coming to visit me in New York City. And he said, you know, I'm really excited to game. We just binge watched all 3 seasons or 4 seasons or however many seasons there were at that point of Game of Thrones. And I was like, holy sugar, honey, iced tea. That is amazing. We have suddenly a common bond now, right? We've got this world. So I ran a game with him and his friend Charles, who's an old school gamer. Charles has like gamed with some of the original guys in Wisconsin, like back in the day. That's an interesting story on its own. But he hadn't played a lot of role-playing games, just a lot of board games, a lot of wargaming. Okay. So I said, listen, we're going to play a game. I ran a very altered version of Burning Wheel, made more simple. And really, honestly, the main change I had to make playing with older folks is I had to make the font bigger. The font was too small. They could not read anything on the Burning Wheel character sheet. It was rough. Changes had to be made. So I set it 200 years before the TV show, and I said, you know, it's the Targaryen Civil War, or as they call it, the Dance of Dragons, and you are the head Stark. You know, you're the warden in the north, and you can decide which of the Targaryens in the Civil War you support. And there's no right answer. And I really drilled that home to them. There's no right answer. I don't know where this is going. I don't know how this is going to go. And I was playing into my dad, right? Because I know that he loves military science fiction. I know that he loves, you know, his favorite parts of Lord of the Rings. He would cut every part with a hobbit in it. He was like, let's just get to Aragorn on battlefields, killing stuff. That's awesome. So we can do that, right? So we had an amazing game. I'll put links to the actual plays and the blog posts I made about it because I documented it. It was incredible. I got to show my dad what I did for years, decades now. And you know, there were days where I would leave him for the weekend after a weekend with him, and I would go game on Sundays rather than go watch football with him. And it was important to me to show him what that was. What were you doing all those years? So it was cool to show him. And the most gratifying thing to hear was, I understand why you do this. This is really cool. The other big help for that game was my friend Whit, who's a college gamer, guy I've been gaming with for years. He played an important role in that game. He played a maester, which if you don't know Game of Thrones lore, they're like advisors, they're tutors, they're surgeons, they're people who know stuff. They're scholars, they're monks, they're scholarly monks. And Whit played the maester, so he could give advice. And I've got to say, if you're playing with new players, if you can get one old player in there who's playing a kind of mentor, supportive role, it's a huge deal. Big deal to get a Gandalf in there. You know, someone who can help, but someone who can also knows enough to kind of sit back and chill. Someone who's supportive. It was great. It was really, really, really great to have Whit there. And it was so important to have that. It's so vital to have that common vocabulary all of a sudden. Because suddenly the places all rang true to them. They understood why it was interesting to have a wedding with the phrase, right? And why it was kind of funny that their wedding with the phrase went really well. It was a great wedding. It was rocking. It was a good party. And it was a big deal. We could talk about playing in established settings and making it your own. I'll save that for another time. For now, I just want to talk about Westeros a little bit. If you're listening to this and you're like, Judd, I watched a couple episodes of the show, didn't really like it, didn't really like the books, don't understand what everyone's on about. I'm going to give you two options for you. One is called A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman. If you just don't want to read those books, this is, I think, the book of real history that really inspired it. I mean, you could go to The War of the Roses, which is a whole other series of books. But when I read Barbara Tuchman and I read about all the things that were happening in these books, I was like, oh, George definitely read this book. He definitely read this book. So if you're not interested in reading Game of Thrones, but you just want to get that grimy medieval vibe, that's a good one to get. Barbara Tuchman, A Distant Mirror. Check it out. I'll put a link to it in the links. And if you just want to get some Westeros in, but you're just not sure how, there's a series of short stories that were collected called The Night of Seven Kingdoms. And when all of this is said and done, I think that might end up being a better piece of fiction than the books were. I've got issues with the books. I found the fourth book really weak. And I had problems. But Night of the Seven Kingdoms, fantastic. Check it out. If you just want to get your taste, it's a book of short stories. So it's a bunch of complete tales. It happens hundreds of years before the TV show starts. You don't need to know everything to get it. You don't need to know anything to get it. It's a knight and his squire wandering to and fro. Super simple, super fun. They get into hijinks, but by the end of the short story, that part of it is, you get that nice thing of short stories where, oh, I got something complete here. And it's very satisfying. So if you want a complete thing, that's one way to check it out. And if you just want to go a whole different grimdark route, but want to get some history in, check out Barbara Tuchman's A Distant Mirror. And that is Game of Thrones. The TV show is ending on April 14th. So I thought this would be a good time to kind of talk about it a little bit. Just get it out. If you have a piece of literature that has affected your gaming a lot, or that has helped you share gaming with people you love and care about, please let me know. Drop me a line. And that was a good one, Inspiration Goat. Thank you very much. And that's about it. That was a good one. I'm into it. All right. If this inspired anything in you, please drop me a line. If you've gamed in Westeros, or if you've gamed in somewhere that's an established book setting, let me know. Tell me how you did it. You can either email me at judd.karlman@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter, or you can hit me up on Mastodon, or wherever you want. Drop me a line. You can get on Anchor, the Anchor podcast, and drop me a message. That's cool too. You can email me a message, or you can just write me something. Any way you want to go. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I hope your spring is your end of winter is going well, and you're doing okay. All right. Thanks. Let me know what you're thinking, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.